Well, I'm joined now by businessman Henry Dimbleby, who founded the healthy fast food chain Leon and co-authored the government's school food plan. Morning, Henry.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us on Times Radio. I'm also joined by Fergus Hay, who's had a career at various advertising agencies, most recently as CEO of Legus Delaney, who's going to tell us what it means for the advertising industry. Morning, Fergus.
Good morning, Matt.
So, Henry, you've advised the government several times on what to do to make children eat more healthily in schools. What do you make of what you've heard for the plan to make the rest of the country follow suit?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that this crisis has been a national wake-up call, and that we can't ignore the diet, the damage our diet is doing to our health and well-being anymore. 1.6 million years are lost a year to death and ill health from bad diet, and that's not just to the people who suffer, that's to their lovers, their spouses, their parents, their children, their friends. Responsible people in the industry have been saying they need regulation, because if you don't have regulation, less responsible people will profit from the things that are being stopped. And I'm doing some work on the National Food Strategy at the moment for government, which is being launched on Wednesday, and the roles that they have, the things that they put in place to limit advertising and promotion of unhealthy foods can play a strong role in kick-starting a change in the government's position on this.
Well, it's being Fergus in there. It's the right thing to do to ban junk food advertising. What do you think about that, Fergus?
Well, I think the truth is advertising at its very, very most powerful and effective is it builds a kind of irrational emotional attachment amongst consumers to a brand. And it's that kind of impulse, that deep-held desire to choose something. Now, that's fine when it's holidays or financial services or fashion, but clearly if it's something that is going to have a detrimental impact on yourself and then on society, then there has to be a sense of responsibility amongst the advertising community. And that means that we have to take a look at the medias that are chosen and available and make sure that there are restrictions put in place to make sure that we're not damaging society.
Over the weekend, some of the reaction I saw from other people in the advertising industry, they seem to be saying this would both decimate the advertising industry, but it would also make no difference to the effects of trying to improve the nation's health, which made me sort of slightly think, well, maybe does that mean the advertising doesn't work? Presumably you would say that advertising does work, and these junk food ads do encourage people to eat less healthily.
Well, I think, as ever, the individual statements have some sort of agenda behind it. The truth,
Surely not.
Who knew? Human nature. The truth is that good advertising works, and big brands have been built to create that emotional attachment amongst consumers and brands. So it will have an impact. But like everything in life, it's not simply a silver bullet. It has to be part of a broader programme that I'm sure Henry and Jamie Oliver were talking about earlier are propelling. The reality is that these are impulse purchases. What that means is I walk down the high street and I feel like I want a snack or to eat, and I'll make an impulse purchase. And there's lots of communications on the high street, lots of out-of-home advertising that triggers me to choose a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a Burger King. And all of that needs to be managed. It's not just about TV, and it's not just about the digital advertising. It's also about the out-of-home advertising, and to reduce that impulse purchase. That's why I was interested to see and delighted to see the government say, look, we're going to change where products are stocked in supermarkets. We all know the final 5 meters from the checkout is where you make those impulse purchases, where you lean for that candy bar, that chocolate bar. And so if we're going to change that impulse urge as well, then you can start to make a difference. Of course, it has to be part of a wider program, and that's part of the education program. That's part of the availability and the product sets that these businesses need to take responsibility for stocking.
Henry, instead of just targeting the advertising, shouldn't the government be doing something about food? If it thinks that people shouldn't be eating things which are unhealthy, shouldn't we be doing something about, actually, smoking is a sort of similar thing that, we banned the advertising of smoke. People can still keep on smoking. Maybe we should ban smoking as well. Maybe I'm just calling for everything to be banned. Should the government be doing something about the source of this problem? What actually goes into food, rather than just worrying about the advertising of it, which is sort of the last stage of the process, if you like.
Well, it's a complicated system. So, what people eat, what I eat, what you eat, is kind of depends upon our own character, the social environment we're in, and the physical environment we're in. And what this has done is taken action on the physical environment. But I do think there is more to be done. You talked about the sugar tax earlier on. What the sugar tax did, interestingly, was it didn't put the price of fizzy drinks up. It reduced the amount of sugar that we consume from fizzy drinks by 45,000 tonnes a year. So reformulation. I think there is more to be done, not only to stop the advertising, but also to ensure that the other foods that we eat are better for us.
And how annoying is it from your point of view, Henry, having advised, well, the governments have come in various forms over the last few years, trying to get something done on this, and actually it takes the Prime Minister himself being told by the doctors to lose some weight for him to decide that everyone else should follow suit?
I'm absolutely delighted. In the report I'm publishing on Wednesday, which also goes into hunger and poverty and trade, I had a whole set of recommendations on this, all of which were preempted. As I was about to press send, I got a note from government saying they were doing them all, and I'm absolutely delighted that you've done it. I don't think it matters how things get done. There's strong evidence behind this policy. It's the right thing to do.
And you mentioned food poverty and people who might struggle to make ends meet. I mean, obviously, quite often junk food, at least in the short term, is a cheaper option. Is that something that worries you, that the attempts to maybe put up the prices or limit offers and that sort of thing, as Boris Johnson himself said, that quite often could end up clobber those who can least afford it?
I don't think it will, actually, in this case, but I do think there's a very complicated relationship between poverty and the kinds of foods that you eat. It's actually not to do with the absolute price, so the vegetables are quite cheap, but it's to do with the environment, the kinds of kitchens people have, and I'm going to be doing a lot more work to try and tease that out. But if you look at, the least affluent decile, obesity in that group is about 35% versus about 20% for the rest of the population. So we're all too heavy, or on average, we're all too heavy, but particularly people who are less affluent struggle. And that's a really complicated set of factors, which I'm going to be trying to work out how you tackle.
Do you think the government, it just sounds like you're pushing at an open door right now, that they're receptive to almost anything that you come up with?
Well, I'm really pleased, actually, because there was this kind of instinctive response against all this stuff. And, it is everyone's right to tell people what they've got to sell. There's not much advertising in North Korea. But we can't have a society where people profit from illness and from misery, and this recognition that the society we've created is not a society that we want to live in, and that regulation is required to change that, I think is just great news.
Fergus, bring you back in there. This isn't a great time for the advertising industry, full stop, is it? One of the impacts of coronavirus and the pandemic and the lockdown is that advertising's dropped off a cliff in lots of areas. What impact will this move have on the advertising industry, which, whatever people might think of it, does employ quite a lot of people?
Yeah, indeed, but it's also a very, very broad industry. So, people focus a lot on the media spend, and you'll see data published recently that over 50% of companies have reduced their media spend. But the truth is, consumers don't choose brands just through the media awareness. So you will see, and have seen over the last 20 years, a huge amount of products and services developed by brands in order to engage with consumers. While the economy and the media economy might be dropping, what doesn't change is consumers' behaviors. But consumers still want to buy things, and the advertising industry is effectively there to drive growth for businesses. How do we get more customers to buy more of our products over a longer period of time? And it may be that the tools used will change. And just to kind of bring that back to Henry's point, I do think that there is a responsibility that needs to be embraced by the corporations for the impact that they have on society beyond just where they're spending their media dollars. And if you look at the Generation Z and the millennials and what drives them for choosing products and brands, now they really are looking for the ethical values of those companies. And they are choosing brands and products, and they're willing to pay a bit more for brands and products that have a sense of social consciousness and a sense of ethical purpose. If that is the case, then these businesses need to not only think about reducing where they spend their media, but also what are they doing to solve the problem? And you can take a cue from the athletics industry. Nike make sneakers, and people go out and they buy a pair of sneakers or trainers, they go for a run. But 20 years ago, Nike started building digital products and services to enable people to be more fit and more active. You have Nike Plus, Nike Run, all of the Nike fitness apps. And of course, that's serving their commercial need because they get to have longer relationships with consumers. But it's also driving a more active and healthy society. So the question is, what is McDonald's, what is Burger King, what is KFC going to do to take responsibility for creating digital products and services to educate the young audience in order to be more self-aware of what they're consuming, and then follow that up with products that are healthier and have more nutritional value? Then you'll start to see a shift in the whole kind of social curve to changing behaviour.
I mean, Matt, on the advertising thing, the advertising industry made the same points about smoking, first cigarettes, then cigars, gambling, and none of these situations where there was regulation did the total advertising spend fall. So, people will find things to advertise, and it just be, but the advertising industry should be using their power not to fight this watershed, but to help, as Fergus said, fight obesity.
Do we need an ad campaign for fruit and vegetables to rival McDonald's or KFC or whatever?
Yes. So there's a brilliant thing called Veg Power, which was done by John Hegarty from BBH, big advertising guru, and they got free space from ITV, and they advertised veg, eat them to defeat them. The children had to eat the veg to kill them and stop them taking over the world. And it measurably increased the amount of veg that were consumed. And yes, we do. We need to fight. We need to advertise better stuff. The problem is there's no money in advertising carrots.
There's a terrifying stat on that, actually. 2017, about 300 million was spent on advertising confectionery, soft drinks and snacks, healthy and unhealthy snacks, and only 2.5 million was spent on advertising vegetables. So you can see how it's an unfair fight. Interestingly, though, Iceland did a very famous campaign where they showed beautiful vegetables half in an ice cube to say, look, frozen veg, if frozen at source, have got positive nutritional value. So again, if businesses can understand how the demand for vegetables that have got positive nutritional value can be part of their own commercial growth, then you don't need to have a kind of non-for-profit solo vegetable campaign. You can weave it into the commercial fabric of these businesses.
Oh God, we just need someone to launch an ad campaign for carrots. Big Pharma, presumably, is the obvious place to go for that. That's Henry Dimbleby from the fast food chain Leon, and Fergus Hay, who's worked in advertising in various agencies, talking us through this idea of banning junk food advertising as part of Boris Johnson's crackdown on obesity, following his own basically being told to lose weight by his own doctor. Good to talk through that here on Times Radio this morning.